Russell Norman, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking briefly to this bill, because I don't think it's worth a very long speech, but I think that the Greens will be also opposing the bill on the basis of the elements with it, which is punishing hard-working children, which seems a very strange thing for the National Party to be doing, introducing a scheme which makes it harder for children to go and earn a bit of pocket money. I would have thought that the National Party was of the view that we want to get people into the work ethic early on, and so we want to encourage them, and then they're introducing a special piece of legislation to punish newspaper boys. We're having a special piece of legislation coming into the House. There'll be like millions of dollars spent on it because you've got all these people sitting around and they're all going to discuss it so that we can punish kids who are earning a little bit of pocket money. Now, it seems a very strange thing for the National Party to bring to this House as part of their great tax reforms. Because, of course, what's really needed in this bill, the missing pieces of this bill, are the structural transformations in the economy driven by the tax changes. Where is the thing in this bill about introducing a capital gains tax? Why isn't that within this bill? If we're talking about making the structural changes in the New Zealand economy so that we can actually move capital into the productive sector, then we would have a bill in front of us, and it would be as part of this bill that is introducing a capital gains tax. When you look at the projections that are in the budget that was just put out, they are for the current account deficit to get worse, right? So let's be clear, the budget papers put out today that form the background to the bill in front of us, they were for the current account deficit to get worse over time. So this is the background to the bill that we have in front of us, is the government's budget analysis, and it says, as a result of what this government is doing, the imbalances in our economy will get worse. So if they were serious about dealing with the real imbalances in our economy, then surely they would deal with that. That would be something that would be within this bill. I mean, to look at it in a larger picture, when this government came into being, when it came in 2008, the real economy was in trouble. There was a very large current account deficit, large private sector debt, but the government books were in excellent shape. Right? So during this period of crisis, they've been able to use the fact that there's been a lot of leeway to borrow money on the government account, and so they've borrowed a lot of money on the government books to buffer the situation we've been through. So they had the advantage of that very low government debt. However, when they are kicked out of office in 2014, we're going to have a situation where not only is the real economy still in deep trouble, because their projections are that it will be still in deep trouble, large current account deficit, net international investment position getting worse, not only will the real economy be in a bad position like the one they inherited, but there will be no opportunity to buffer it through government borrowing because they are borrowing $75 billion. So the big picture that sits behind this budget is that they are ruining the one good thing they inherited from the Labor government that came before them, or one of the good things they inherited was that the government's debt was very, very low. And that has given them the opportunity to buffer the situation we're in. So when they lose office in 2014, not only will the real economy still be in deep trouble because of the huge current account deficit, the huge imbalance within our economy, which Bill English quite rightly identified when he first became Finance Minister, but has done nothing to fix, according to his own projections, the projections in his own budget, right? He's done nothing to fix it. But then by 2014, the big buffer that they had available to them, which was the ability to borrow money on the government account, that buffer will be gone. So we will be left not only with very large levels of government debt, but we will also have an underperforming economy with huge imbalances. That will be the legacy based on the projections in the budget that was presented today. That will be the legacy of this government. So we have a bill in front of us to make some very small changes in terms of broadening the tax base. I believe Bill English described these things as putting a tax on newspaper deliverers is broadening the tax base these days, when the real thing that we should have been doing to broaden the tax base and to actually make structural reform within the New Zealand economy is not happening. That is the reality of what this government has done. That is a terrible travesty. That is a missed opportunity. They had the opportunity to actually begin the rebalancing of the New Zealand economy and they failed to do it. Now, one of the things, of course, that the government talks about a lot is Kiwi mums and dads. Well, I think in the context of this bill, we should also talk about Kiwi mums, dads and kids, because, you know, they're putting a special tax on children. And so, Kiwi mums and dads, the government constantly tells us that Kiwi mums and dads have all of this special cash out there, which they're going to be using to buy shares in the SOEs when they're privatised. And children, perhaps, as well, I don't know. But the reality for actual, real New Zealand mums and dads is that they're struggling to pay the bills. The reality, because this government is so wildly out of touch with the real world, the reality is that real Kiwi mums and dads are struggling to pay the bills. So they don't have lots of cash out there which they can use to buy shares in these SOEs that they currently own as taxpayers. They're actually struggling to pay the bills because GST was put up by the government in order to pay for tax cuts for upper income earners. So the reality for real mums and dads is they have to pay more for their food because the government increased GST. Why did they increase GST? In order to pay for tax cuts for the wealthy, for upper income earners. That is a ridiculous fiscal strategy, and it is an offensive fiscal strategy. Mr. Speaker, the Green Party won't be voting for the bill to tax hard-working kids. We think it's a ridiculous proposal. What we'd like to see the government bring to this House is some actual proposals that will rebalance the economy and make some real reforms rather than this kind of legislation.
Kanwal Bakshi.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to take a brief call on the first reading of the Taxation Budget Measures Bill.